Hello everybody and welcome back to another Disney craft tutorial. Today we are going to be making these really cool Disney silhouette watercolor crafts. And today, to get started, we're going to need a couple supplies. So we're going to need some crayons, preferably a white crayon if you have it, but if not, any color crayon will work. Some scissors, watercolors, a piece of watercolor paper. This is meant for watercolors, but if you don't have this at your house, you can also just use regular white printer paper. The only thing is that the paper just has to be white for the project to work. Some glue. So you can use a glue stick, you can use white Elmer's glue, you could use Mod Podge, but I just have a glue stick with me, so I'm going to use that today. A cup of water for your watercolors. And lastly, you're going to need a Disney character silhouette. These different characters can be found on our Disney Classroom. I'll give you a little bit of a tip later on how to get these characters. So first, to start our craft, we are going to need to take our piece of paper. So this is watercolor paper, and the reason I'm using watercolor paper is because we are using watercolors. And really the only difference between watercolor paper and printer paper is watercolor paper is a little bit thicker. So when we go ahead and we paint on our watercolors, it has a little bit more thickness so that the watercolors and the water doesn't seep through as much. If you're using printer paper, you may see when you paint on your watercolors and after it dries, the sides of the paper may kind of curl up a little bit. That's okay. You can always maybe put a book on top of it to kind of flatten it out again, but the project will work just as well if you have just regular white printer paper. So don't worry, you can still do the craft. So I'm going to take my piece of paper and I'm going to take my white crayon. The reason I am using a white crayon is because I want to draw designs in the background. So I'm not sure if you can see on here with the lighting, but with white crayon, before I watercolored this, I drew some waves at the top, I drew a starfish, I drew a fish, and some other designs in the background just to add a little bit of extra as the background. So that's kind of what we'll be doing with our white crayon, is we'll be drawing something on here, but we won't see it really until we paint our watercolors on top, and then it'll kind of pop through, which I think is super cool. These watercolor crafts are one of my all-time favorites. I just love watercolors, and I just think it looks so cool with the Disney silhouette. It just makes it look so bold. So once you have your piece of paper and you have your white crayon, you're pretty much ready to start your background. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to choose one of the silhouettes from our Google Classroom. So there's a bunch uploaded there that you can choose from. Today I am going to be doing Mickey Mouse, and the other day I made Little Mermaid. So for our Disney silhouettes, there are a couple different options that you could do. So on our Google Classroom, there are a bunch of Disney silhouettes that I have collected and put up there for you guys. What you could do, which I would probably say is the easiest option, is to choose one of those characters and to print the one out that you would like. And once it comes out of the printer, taking your scissors and just cutting it out, and then you will have your silhouette. They are pretty detailed, so it could create a lot of cutting. This is something that, you know, if you need help with, maybe you can ask somebody around your house to help you cut it out. But what you can do is you could just print out one of the silhouettes off of the computer from the Google Classroom. If you don't have enough ink, it could take a lot of black ink. So what you could do is you could go onto Google and you could find, say if you wanted to do this Mickey Mouse, what you could do is you could go onto Google and you could type in Mickey Mouse Disney coloring sheet, and a bunch of Mickey Mouse coloring sheets will come up. What you could do is you could print out one of the coloring sheets, and then once it comes out of the printer, you could take a black crayon and color in your coloring sheet black, and then cut out the character, and then it will look like this. If you don't have a printer at home, you could also pull up one of the silhouettes on your computer, and you could take a piece of printer paper and you could put it up against your screen and you could trace around it, and then you could cut it out, and then you could also color it black. There's lots of options. Or if you're doing something like Mickey Mouse, you could even just do Mickey Mouse's head, and you could even free draw Mickey Mouse's head. So there's lots of options for you to do. So do whatever makes most sense for you, or whatever materials you have available at your house. So once you've chosen your Disney silhouette and you have it cut out and ready to go, at this point, you're kind of ready to decide what you want your background to be. So for me, when I did Little Mermaid, I did starfish in the background, I did some waves, and I did a couple fish. It's kind of hard to pick up here, but when I'm looking at it in person, I can see them kind of popping through. So once you have your character cut out, then you can kind of decide what you want your background to be. So for me, I'm doing Mickey Mouse, so I think I'm just going to do some cool designs in the background. I'm not the best artist, so I'm not going to do anything too elaborate, but I'm just going to kind of take my crayon and just kind of draw some cool shapes and designs that will kind of pop through once I do my watercolor. So that's what I'm going to do as kind of my second step. So I'm kind of just drawing some different shapes, some little squigglies. You could even write something in the background, so I might even write Mickey Mouse. It's kind of cool because you can't really see it, so it'll be kind of a surprise once you put down your watercolor. It'll remind you of all the things that you drew. And you can take as long as you need to on this part. So if you want to do more of an elaborate drawing with your crayon, feel free to pause the video and do all your decorating, and then you can play it again once you're to the spot that I'm at. But I think I've added enough of my markings on here. I would show you, but you can't really see it. It's kind of invisible right now. I'm going to go ahead and put away my crayon. Okay, the next step for me is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with my watercolors. So I have my watercolor set here, and then I have my paintbrush that it came with, and then I also have a cup of water. The water is kind of the trick to making these watercolors work. I would make sure that you're in a space where you can easily clean up a mess if you accidentally knock over your water or if you accidentally get some paint on the table. I'm just on a glass table, so it'll be easy for me to wipe up if any water or paint kind of seeps through my paper or gets onto the sides. So to get started, I'm just going to wet my paintbrush, and I'm going to decide what color I want to use first. What's really cool about watercolors is that they kind of just all blend together. So if you can kind of see on here, I used a combination of blue, green, and a little bit of yellow to kind of mix around. And when I was doing it, I kind of just started with one color and I kind of just did some random brush strokes, dipped my paintbrush into water and added a little bit more, and it kind of just fades it out. You don't have to be a pro to watercolor, which is really great, and that's what I love about it, is that I'm not very artistic, but with watercolors, I feel like anytime I do it, it just looks super cool. So I'm going to start by just dipping my paintbrush in water and then choosing my color, and I'm just going to start painting. You may need to do a couple dunks of water and then go back to add a little bit more to kind of make it a little bit more liquidy so that you get enough on your paintbrush to be able to spread onto your paper. And it dries out pretty quickly on here. So what's really cool is that you can kind of paint on, and once your paintbrush the paint kind of dies down a little bit, what you can do is you can dip your paintbrush into water and go over the top of it, and it'll kind of just spread it out, which is super cool. I love this about watercolors. It kind of adds for a really cool faded look in certain areas wherever you want it to be. Oh, and I already see the words Mickey Mouse popping through, which is super cool. Cool thing about this project is people who have been in my Disney class probably have done this project at some point because it's one of my all-time favorites. And the great thing is that you can make a lot of these. I have done so many different characters that even if you've done this project before, you could choose a different character and create a whole new one that looks completely different. I've even seen something on Pinterest where somebody did all the characters from one of their favorite movies, and they actually got frames and put them up in their movie room. of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you when working with watercolors, especially if you're using a little tiny paintbrush like I am, is to use your water. So once you dip your paintbrush into the paint, you'll be able to spread it on your piece of paper and then you'll see that it'll kind of dry up. But you can immediately dip your paintbrush into water and just kind of go over that, and it'll help to spread out that paint really, really well. It'll give it that watercolor look that I love so much when working with watercolors. In this one, I'm kind of just adding a bunch of different colors. In the past, I've done more of like a theme where it's, you know, Under the Sea reminds me of blue and yellow and greens. But with this one, with Mickey Mouse, I feel like any colors could be great. So I'm just kind of using all the colors in my palette and just kind of seeing how it will look. Okay, you guys, so my paper is fully colored in watercolors, but my paper is pretty wet right now. So if we went to glue down our silhouette, it would not stick because this is wet. So what I would suggest doing, I'm luckily outside and it looks like the sun is starting to come out. So what I may do is I could just leave it out here for a few minutes. What's really great about watercolors is they dry really, really quickly, depending on how much water you use. And with me using watercolor paper, it does dry a little bit quicker than regular printer paper would, but I could just leave this out here for a few minutes in the direct sunlight and it would probably dry super quickly. If you're not outside and there's no sun out, what you could do is you could just let it sit on its own inside without any sunlight and it would still dry really quickly. If you're anxious like me and you want it to dry immediately, you could even go like this and it would dry really quick, or you could even use a hair dryer to dry it. But mine's already feeling pretty dry, so I'm just gonna kind of go like this and it'll be dry in a few minutes. If you guys aren't quite done watercoloring yet, feel free to just pause the video, and once you're done watercoloring, then you can play it again and pick up where you left off. So I think for the remainder, it's still a little damp, so I'm just gonna set it here and I'm just gonna let it dry for a few minutes. Okay, you guys, I am back. I let my painting dry out in the sun for about 5 minutes, and now it is completely dry and it is ready to glue down my Disney silhouette right in the middle there. Before I do that though, I'm gonna just do like a little bit of cleanup. We are all done with our watercolors, so I'm just gonna go ahead and wash off my brush to get any paint that's left on there off of there, and I'm going to set my paintbrush back into my watercolor set. I usually leave my watercolors open just so that they can fully dry, and then I will shut them. And since I'm outside, they will dry really quickly, so I'm just going to set those aside open, and once they are completely dry, I will go ahead and close them and put them away. Next, what we are going to need is our glue stick. So to glue down our character, what we're going to need to do is first decide where you want your character on your paper. I think for me, I'm just going to put it right in the middle there, and then I'm going to put glue on one side of the character. If you printed this out and you colored it black, I would go ahead and put the glue on the side that is not black, because that's the side that's going to be laying face down that you won't see. So I'm just going to go ahead and add glue all over my silhouette. And like I said, you can use any kind of glue. I just happen to have a glue stick available, but if you have Mod Podge or if you have like Elmer's glue, the kind that squeezes out of the bottle, that's totally fine. That will work great. You could probably even tape this down as long as the watercolor is completely dry. You could kind of roll up the tape and stick it onto the back if you don't have any glue. Okay. So I got glue all over the backside of my Mickey Mouse. I'm going to go ahead and just set it straight down onto my watercolored paper. And I'm going to kind of just press it down while the glue starts to dry. Okay, and once you feel like it's on there pretty well, I'm going to go ahead and put my glue stick away. So once you feel like it's on there pretty well and you don't think it's going to pop up or it doesn't need any more pushing down, you are done. This is the final product. It's super cute. Like I said, you can make tons of these. You could do the same character with different color backgrounds. You could do different characters with different backgrounds. The opportunities are endless. That's why I love, love, love these. I'll probably end up hanging these up somewhere, maybe in my back by my office at ABC. If you guys do create these watercolor crafts and you like how it turned out, feel free to post a comment on our Google Classroom or post a picture of your artwork. I would love to see them. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.